guys, welcome back to my really long channel. This is the Bed and Breakfast Star by Jacqueline Wilson. This is all Jacqueline Wilson's own work, just reading it for entertainment and pleasure purposes. The next chapter is called Pizza and Porky Pies, and that's on page 122. We're just going to read the next chapter today because, again, they're a little bit longer than the usual chapter. So without further ado, let's get going. I was right to feel edgy. I didn't like this new school at all. I didn't get to sit next to Naomi in her class. I was put in a special class, which was a bit humiliating for a start. They said it was just for a little while to see how things worked out. Fine, if they did work out, but what if they didn't? Where do you go if you're too thick for even a special class? Do they march you right back to the infants? I didn't like my teacher in the strange class I got in. I wanted a young man teacher like Jamie. Mrs. Fisher was old and probably a woman, though she had a moustache above her upper lip. She also had a hard voice that could rip right through you, though when I first got shoved in her class, she stretched her thin lips in a smile and said in an ever such sugary, sweety tones that she was pleased to meet me, and oh, what a pretty name Elsa is, and here was my notebook, and have this nice sharp pencil, dearie, and why don't you sit at the front where I can see you and write me a little story about yourself? She was trying to kids on she was really interested in me, but she couldn't fool me. When she took us all out to the playground to have PE, she got talking to one of the other teachers. The other teacher saw me barging around doing batty things with a beanbag and asked Mrs. Fisher who I was. Mrs. Fisher didn't even tell her my name. She just said, "Oh, that's just one of the bed and breakfast children." I'm not even a she. I'm a that. Some sort of boring blob who doesn't have a name or who doesn't even have a sex. Answer the blob. Hey, I quite like that idea. I could be a great giant monster. Blob and the Squelch around obliterating people. Mac is still first on my list, but Mrs. Fisher comes a close second. I wrote her a little story about myself, all right. I wrote that my real name is Elsa-Rina, and I'm a child star actress, singer and comedian. And I've been in lots of adverts on the telly and done panto and heaps of musicals. And I was actually currently starring in a travelling repertory performance of Annie, me playing Annie, of course. And I wrote that my mum and the rest of my family are all in showbiz too, part of the company, and that's why we're currently living in a hotel, because we travel around putting on our shows. I tried to make it sound dead convincing, but when she read it, she just gave me one of those smug old smiles. "This is certainly some story, dear," she said. "Rather a fairy story, I'm afraid." The other kids tittered. They didn't know what she was on about. She had handed me my story back with a spelling and punctuation mistake underlined. There seemed to be more red ink on the page than pencil, but I was not deterred. If I was meant to be thick, and then some of the kids in the class were dense as drains and gurgled into my bargain. So I tried out Elsa-Rina's story on them, and they were all dead impressed, even the big tough guys. I gave them a few quick samples of my comic routine out in the playground, and some of them laughed, and then I treated them to a rendition of The Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow. I forget what a powerful voice I've got. One or two of them ran for cover, but those that stayed seriously seemed to appreciate my performance. School didn't seem quite so bad at this stage. I had my little group of fans who happily drank in everything I told them. I got a bit carried away and started to elaborating about my mum being this really beautiful actress, and yet she could belt out a song and dance up a storm in this really classy cabaret act. And every so often I seemed to step out myself and hear my own voice, and I could see I was tempting fate telling all these lies. Well, they weren't completely lies. Mum did used to be beautiful before she met up with Mac and had some more kids, so that she lost her lovely figure and gained a few worry lines. She could still look beautiful if only she'd bothered to slap on some makeup and do her hair properly. She really did used to sing and dance too. She'd sing along to all the records on the radio in a happy husky voice, and she'd dance away, wiggling her hips and waggling her fingers, so Mum could sing and dance, and if only she had had the right breaks, then I'm sure she really could be a star. All the same, I shut up at lunchtime when I met my Naomi. It was great to have my own special friend to wander around the playground with. School dinners weren't so bad either. They weren't a patch on my mega feast at home with Pippa, but you were allowed to choose what you wanted, so I had a big plate full of pizza and chips, and I set all our lunch table laughing with a whole load of pizza jokes that aren't fit for publication. Even my silly old chip joke went down well salted. Hey, you lot, what are hot, greasy and romantic? Chips that pass in the night. The afternoon wasn't so great because we had to divide up into groups to do all this dumb weighing and measuring. I could do that easy peasy, but I didn't have much a clue when it came to how you write it all down. I didn't want to admit this, so I made it up a lot. And then, of course, Mrs. Fisher came nosing around, and when she saw all of my calculations, she sighed and scored a line right through them. So it was obvious to everyone I'd got it all wrong. She sat down with me and tried to explain how to do it. I felt stupid in front of all the others, and so I couldn't take it in. She had to go through the whole gubbins again, speaking ever so slowly, because she was obviously thought she had a right moron on her hands. The other kids started to snigger by this stage, so when Mrs. Fisher at last left us in peace, I had to work hard again to regain their respect. I started on about my stage clothes and my mum's stage clothes and my little sister Pippa's stage clothes, and once I'd started on Pippa I couldn't stop, and soon I'd turned her into this adorable little child star with chubby cheeks and a head of curls, and though she hadn't started school yet, she could sing and dance like a real trooper. I was certainly going a bit over the top here, because even Mac and Mum admit that Pippa is plain. Well, the poor kid can't help being lumbered with Mac as a dad. She hasn't got chubby cheeks, she hasn't got curls. Mum did have a go with her curling tongs once when Pippa was going to party, but her hair ended up looking like it had exploded. She isn't even little. She's nearly as big as me, though she's half my age. And as for singing and dancing, well, Pippa can't ever remember the words to any song, let alone the tune, and the only sort of dancing she can do is slam dancing, though she doesn't mean to barge straight into you. But I built her up in such a little baby wonder that the kids in my class were drooling, and they wanted to see the show with me, and this mega brilliant little brat and our glamorous movie star mummy. Sorry folks, we've been sold out for weeks because the show's so popular, I said breezily, though my heart was beating fit to bust. That shut them up for a few seconds, but then I started to wonder about going home time. Mum had caught me out yesterday by trailing around to school. What if she did again today? What if she just pulled on her oldest t-shirt and leggings and hadn't bothered to do her hair? All the children would see her for themselves, and even if I could somehow manage to convince them that she was just practicing for a forthcoming, searingly realistic drama on the telly about a careworn young mother ground down by the system, they'd see Pippa too. It might help matters if the whole family were present and correct. I could tell them that Mac was all set out to remake of King Kong. He didn't even need to bother with a costume. I shot out of the school the moment the bell went. It was a huge, great relief to see that Mum wasn't there, though I couldn't help feeling a weeny bit miffed all the same, because she said she'd come. She wasn't back at the hotel either. None of them were. I couldn't get into room 608 because I didn't have a key, so I had to mooch about the corridors for ages. Naomi came along, but she was a bit narked with me because I hadn't waited for her after school, and she couldn't play with me now anyway because she had to help her mum with her brothers. Then Funnyface sloped into view, scuffing his trainers and spitting. He was even more narked with me because my mum had stirred things up yesterday at the school and had done a check on their registers and sent the truant officer round, and now Funnyface and the famous five had to turn up at school tomorrow or else you'll get into trouble, and Elsa will get into trouble for getting you lot into trouble, I said, pulling a funny face at Funnyface. He didn't pull one back. He called me a lot of rude names, even the infamous one he wrote on the wall that I had to correct. I swept away loftily and pretended I didn't care, but I felt a bit friendless by now, and I was starting to get dead worried that I might be familyless too. Why hadn't they all pushed off without telling me where they were going? What if they'd finally got fed up with me and packed up and scarpered? I knew Mac didn't want me. He'd go like a shot and take Pippa and Hank because they were his kids and he cared about them. But Mum wouldn't walk out on me, would she? Although only this morning, when the drains all went wrong and someone else's dirty water came bubbling up in our basin, she burst into tears and said she couldn't stick this rotten dump any day longer. So maybe she had gone too. The ceiling suddenly seemed a long way off. I felt I was getting smaller and smaller until I wasn't much more than a squeak. I hunched up on the floor with my head on my knees and held on tight in case I disappeared altogether. Elsa, what on earth are you doing? What's up, eh? Said Mum, coming down the corridor. Yes, it was Mum, and I was so pleased to see her, even though she sounded cross, and I was very pleased to see Pippa, even though she was all sniffy with her nose running, and I was very pleased to see Hank, even though he was howling his head off and needing his nappy changed, and I wasn't very pleased to see Mac. I wouldn't ever go that far. Where have you been? I've been back from school ages and ages. Yeah, well, I'm sorry, love, but it's not our fault. We had a right ding-dong with that useless manager this morning because we're all going to end up getting typhoid or cholera stuck in this poxy dump. And the tight-fisted pig won't even send for a plumber to fix things. Would you believe? Anyway, he said, we could clear off if we don't like it here. And so I said we were doing our best to do just that. But we didn't have any place to go. So then we went down to the housing office, all of us, and would you believe it, they kept us waiting all day. They weren't even going to see us at all because we didn't have some stupid appointment. But we sat it out, and I knew you'd be waiting, Pet, but I couldn't do anything, could I? So what's happened, Mum? Are we getting a house? Oh, we heck, said Mum. They just mumbled on about priority families and exceptional circumstances, and said even if this dump was affecting our health, we'd have to get some really bad complaints. And it would all have to be written up on medical reports, and even then, if we were all at death's door, they couldn't blooming well guarantee us a house, or even a mouldy old flat like we used to have. So I asked what was guarantee us a house. Did one of you kids have to snap it all together? Is that it? Max said. It's getting dangerously close to. Look at little Pippa, all sniffles. She can't get rid of that cold. And as for the baby, well, I don't like the sound of his chest at all. Matt sighed over Hank, who was still exercising his magnificent lungs. They certainly sounded in full working order. Yeah, Max started to get really stroppy. Well, I did too, especially when they said they couldn't even guarantee us a proper set of rooms here like we were entitled to. Instead of having to squash up like sardines, they said there was nothing further they could do at this moment in time, and threatened to set the police onto us unless we left the office. Mum sighed theatrically, the back of her hand to her forehead. She might be a proper actress, but it certainly sounded as if she'd been giving it a good performance down at the housing office. She threatened to go back again tomorrow, wondering if she could get us rehoused by the sheer persistence. Yes, good thinking, Mum, I said, encouraging her so she wouldn't come to collect me from school and crack my credibility. Only I needn't have bothered. Someone else started telling the wrong sort of tales at the very next day. Someone with a funny face and a great big mouth. Funny Face got shoved in the special class too, right next to me at the front under the Fisher's Pop's eyes. This reminded me of a 101 Popeye Sailorman jokes, you know, and I swapped some with the Funny Face, and we both got in terrible snotty giggles, and Mrs. Fisher's eyes popped so much they almost rolled down her cheeks, and her mouth went so tight her lips disappeared. I'm glad you two are finding school so amusing, she said, dead sarcastic. Perhaps you'd like to share your little jokes with me, Perhaps not. If she heard some of the wilder Popeye jokes, she'd go off her pop herself. So Funny Face and I were getting on famously until playtime, and then one of the kids in the class asked if Funny Face performed too. You what? Said Funny Face. Are you a child star like Elsa Rena and Pipette? They elaborated on the famous fictional talents of me and my family, and Funny Face fell about thinking this was just another joke, a wind-up on my part. You lot aren't half loopy, said Funny Face. How come you've fallen for this rubbish? Elsa isn't a famous star, she's just a bed and breakfast kid like me. And cripes, you should see her mum and her dopey little sister stars. That was enough. Funny Face saw stars then, because I punched him right in the nose. All the children started shouting, bite, bite, bite. I was all set to having a proper fight, even though I'm generally gentle, and Funny Face was bewildered, but wanted to fight too because I'd made his nose bleed. But as soon as we'd squared up to each other, Mrs. Fisher came flying forth, and she seized Funny Face in the hand and me in the other. She shook us both vigorously indeed, practically clonking our heads together, and told us we were very rough, naughty children, and we had to learn not to be violent in school. Then, as she stalked off, she said just one word. Well, she muttered it, but I heard, and Funnyface did too. She said typical. She meant we were typical bed and breakfast kids, indulging in the typical disruptive behaviour. And I suddenly felt sick, as if I needed my bed and might well throw up on my breakfast. Funnyface didn't look too clever either. He wiped the smear of blood from his nose and pulled a hideous face at Mrs. Fisher's back, crossing his eyes and waggling his tongue. I giggled feebly. Why did the teacher have crossed eyes, eh? Because she couldn't control her pupils. It was one of my least funny jokes, but Funnyface guffawed politely. Well, she's not going to control us, is she, Elsa? You bet she's not. His nose was still bleeding. I felt my sleeve for a crumpled tissue. Here, I said, dabbing at him. Leave off, you're acting like my mum, said Funnyface. Sorry I socked you when I said. Yeah, well, if that old trout hadn't come along, I'd have flattened you, see? Just as well for you, though you can't quite hit hard for a girl. If you start that, I'll hit you even harder, I said, but I gave his nose another careful wipe. We're still mates, aren't we? Of course we are. Though why did you have to attack me like that, eh? Because of what you said about my mum and my sister. But you were the one telling porcupines, not me. Why did you spin all those stupid stories about them? I mean, it's daft, as if you lot could ever be in showbiz. We could, you know, I said fiercely. Well, maybe not my mum or Pippa, but I'm going to be someday. I'll be famous, just you wait and see. I'll be a comedian. That's a lady who tells jokes. And I'll have my own show, and I'll soon get on the telly. You see, maybe sooner than you think. It was sooner than I thought too, because when Funnyface and I went home from school that day, there was a camera crew filming at the foyer in the Royal Hotel. And that is where we're going to stop, guys. The next chapter is called Television and No Tea, and that's on page 140. But until the next time, guys, thank you for listening, and goodbye.